So you want to know how much money Ric Flair made from 1 year in pro wrestling? The most money he ever made in 1 year of pro wrestling? Well, in this video, I'm going to break it down because Ric Flair, a legendary name, WWE Hall of Famer, former world champion, icon. What else can you say about him? Many people consider him to be the GOAT, but when you become the GOAT, you also make a lot of money. And he's made a lot of money throughout his life. He's also paid out a lot of money. Ric Flair has been one of those guys where he has gone on record and talked about how he's had to pay a lot of money in taxes. And due to various divorces, he's also had to pay a lot of money in alimony. So, how much money exactly has Ric Flair made from wrestling? What was his biggest year in wrestling? Well, let's break it down because Ric Flair was on the Breakfast Club. And of course, he was talking about all things Ric Flair. And he can be quite entertaining when engaged in the conversation, no doubt, right? Ric Flair, he's done it all in this business, right? He's been world champion. He's held a lot of titles. And more importantly, he's given back to the business because Ric Flair most notably gave back to the business when he was part of Evolution alongside the likes of Triple H while helping rise to the level that they became, which was main eventers in Evolution with Batista and Randy Orton, future world champions, and obviously, no doubt, Hall of Famers in their outright. So when it came to money, Ric Flair knew how to make it. And when asked what was the most financial best year of his career, well, he said for a full year, 800,000. And make that twice with Ryan Fitman, who is the CEO of the talent agency that he goes through. Um, and that number kind of surprised me, and I'll get to that in a minute. But Fitman is the CEO and president of the Fitman Sports Group, who takes obviously good care of Ric Flair and all of his adventures. Right, he's in cannabis now. He's in energy drinks. He also is very big in other mainstream avenues, right? He also noted this, which I thought was interesting. He said his usual pay from wrestling was about 500,000 a year. And here's why I thought this was interesting. Because Ric Flair has talked about in various interviews, and I'm sure probably on his documentary, whether it was ESPN 30 for 30 or Peacock, that he had to go to Vince McMahon at one point because he was so in debt to the IRS in back taxes that he had to pay them, that he needed a loan, and Vince McMahon gave him a loan, which obviously is a noble thing from Vince McMahon. But the thing that you have to consider with Ric Flair is, and this is kind of a knock on him, is if it's not about Ric Flair, he's not very interested. And if he doesn't get something from someone, he's not very interested. He recently made an appearance on Kill Tony, which is a comedy podcast hosted by Tony Hinchcliffe. And it's held, I believe, still at the Comedy Club. And Flair was recently on there as a favor to Hinchcliffe because they had met after Flair was on the Joe Rogan Experience. And anytime that Joe has wrestlers on his podcast, he also has Tony Hinchcliffe there. And the reason for that is Tony is he's a mark. Let's be real. He's one of those guys where he's not a hardcore fan. He's just a casual fan. And so he thinks he knows everything, but most of the time it's very cringeworthy when he tries to tell you about wrestling or when this happened or what that happened kind of person. We've all met those people. And it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Anyways, when he was on Kill Tony, he didn't realize, evidently, no one told him this, and clearly he didn't see the show previously, that they were going to make fun of these comedians. That's part of the show. They're open micers. And the moment that he tried to take over, and the moment that they had no interest in hearing him ramble on a Ric Flair rant, he was disengaged, started playing on his phone, and didn't care about the show. Then he took offense that they were mocking these people and left. It's like, dude, what are you doing? Anyways, that story doesn't take away that Ric Flair is arguably the greatest wrestler of all time. and so on and so forth. But yes, that's how much money Ric Flair made from 1 year in pro wrestling, his best year in pro wrestling.